Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And one of the things I've been struck by in this debate has been an element of double standard, in that I hear many calls for those of us on this side of the chamber to temper our language and rhetoric. And yet, those members who are making that call themselves engage in hyperbolic narrative and the casting of aspersions against those who they oppose. So I simply say to Labour members that, if they want to throw stones, they should perhaps step outside of a glass house before doing so. Now, I recognise the importance of education. I was the first person from my family to leave school and go to university. And as a parent of 2 children, education is of vital importance to me, particularly as one of those children has additional educational needs and requires a greater degree of support for learning than in the mainstream environment. So I recognise entirely the importance of education, and it is not something that is alien to me. So if we can perhaps start on that basis and remove ourselves from the casting of aspersions. Let's then look at some of the things that we should be talking about and focusing on in this debate. The first thing to say is that I believe that there is a need for us also to remember the focus on the world that exists outside of the school gate. By the time a child arrives at school, many of those formative experiences that child has play a vital role in terms of that child's future development. The point at which they arrive through the door of the nursery is not the very first point at which their brains can be influenced and that their knowledge and understanding of the world can take place. And that's why I think elements such as, for example, the Play Talk Read and the wider play strategy are important, because it's about encouraging parents to take an active role in the early formative years in terms of encouraging those children, encouraging the inquisitive nature of those children. And that, to me, is exceptionally important. It's also about support for other organisations such as family projects, for example, the Middlefield Project and for Sands Project and the Primpfield Project in my constituency, which deliver important early years work prior to children arriving at school and have taken children, perhaps I could develop just ever so slightly first, and have taken, for example, using the Wee Green Places scheme in Aberdeen, taken children from areas of deprivation where they don't have a great deal of outdoor learning opportunity and outdoor space to, for example, the Botanic Gardens at Aberdeen University and enabled them to gain a wider understanding of nature and of the world around them. That's work that, on the face of it, doesn't actually cost that much in terms of pure monetary value, but in terms of the impact on those children is extremely valuable and extremely important. I'll happily take an intervention from the member.
Joanne Lamont.
I absolutely agree with you about the importance of these kinds of projects. The education, particularly for children from difficult backgrounds, is about more than the school. But would you not recognise that local government, if it's targeted for cuts, these are precisely the kinds of projects that get stripped out of schools, they get stripped out of communities. In the schools I go into, they're no longer education support, behaviour support, learning support teachers and support staff in the way there was before. Surely that must be a concern, because it's these soft things that do actually help close the attainment gap.
Let me address that first of all by saying that the projects that I mentioned, I'm unaware of any proposals that exist on the table at the moment to either reduce or remove those projects in the communities that I represent. I can't speak for other communities or indeed for the priority-based budgeting approach that other local authorities will take. But I'll come back to the point around budgets. The second point is around the environment, the learning environment. And I can look in my constituency at a range of improvements that have been made in terms of the learning environment for our children, whether it's Heatheryburn and Manor Park schools serving communities of regeneration, which are now fantastic state-of-the-art school buildings, replacing dilapidated structures dating from many years previous, whether it's the new Brimmen School in Aberdeen, which took Bucksburn and New Hills from buildings which again were not fit for purpose for the modern curriculum and amalgamated them into one campus. And the interesting thing about that was that at the time that that was proposed, the Labour Party were vehemently opposed to that being taken forward. Now, with a state-of-the-art school building on site, they're singing its praises. I think that demonstrates the commitment that we took as an administration in Aberdeen when I was part of that administration, but also through the funding that was provided through the Scottish Government's programme for improving, renewing school buildings. If we look then furthermore, and I think the point that Joanne Lamont raises about support for learning, additional support needs, is important. I welcome the fact that the Minister has given a commitment that he is going to look at how presumption of mainstreaming is being applied in Scotland. I think there are discrepancies in terms of the way it's being applied by individual local authorities, and I welcome the fact that that is going to be reviewed. I think it might help us to take a more holistic approach to how we deliver education for children with additional support needs. But finally, Presiding Officer, if I may, on the issue around the call for a rational debate on taxation. So allow me to take that opportunity. Now, I am fully signed up to the notion that those with the broadest shoulders should carry the highest burden. But the issue that I have, and the issue that the Finance Committee has, and why it was a unanimous recommendation at the Finance Committee to retain Scottish rate of income tax at 10p, is that adding that 1p on is essentially a flat tax, because you add 1p on to all of the rates of taxation, regardless of how much those people can pay. So I recognise that those of us on a higher income should be prepared to pay a higher burden. But the inflexibility of the Scottish rate of income tax means that the 1p would be added to my tax. It would also be added to those on lower incomes. And the Labour Party does recognise this, because if it didn't, it wouldn't have proposed the rebate scheme. And I say to the Labour Party that it really is important for the detail behind the rebate scheme to be laid out. It cannot be enough for a Labour spokesperson, when asked about this by a Sunday newspaper, to say, "I'm sorry, I'm too busy watching the rugby. That's all you're getting." I'm afraid I'm just at the end of my speech, Ms Brennan.
You must close, please.
For that person to say, "I'm too busy watching the rugby. That's all you're getting."